This is the story of Aavishkaar and of the man who built it, Vineet Rai. It is not the usual tale of a financier chasing returns. It begins with a failed soldier who became a forester who wandered into India's poorest villages, and a conviction that would sound almost naive in a boardroom, that the poor are not poor because they lack ability, but because they lack capital. From a few thousand rupees of personal savings, that idea would grow into one of the world's pioneering impact investors. To understand how, we have to start not in Mumbai, but in the small towns of Rajasthan. In the early 2000s, venture capital in India meant one thing: chasing the next technology company in a big city. The idea that you could use the same tools, patient risk capital and hands-on support, to back tiny enterprises serving India's rural, low-income millions was not just unusual. To most investors, it sounded absurd. Vineet Rai thought otherwise. His proposition was simple and radical at once. Poor people are not poor because they lack capability, but because they lack capital. Give a village entrepreneur money, mentoring, and a fair chance, and they will build businesses that create jobs and lift whole communities. Aavishkaar would be among the first firms anywhere in the world to put that belief to the test. Vineet Rai grew up in Rajasthan, moving from town to town wherever his father's work took the family. His father was a hydro-geologist for the government, a man who searched for water beneath the dry Indian earth, and the family followed him from posting to posting. It was not a life of privilege or connections, but it was a childhood spent close to the real India, the small towns and villages far from the glass towers of Mumbai and Delhi, where most people lived and most of the country's problems and its ingenuity were on plain display. That early exposure to ordinary India would shape everything Rai later chose to do, though at the time he had no idea what that would be. Rai's first dream was not finance or even business. He wanted to join the Indian Army. He sat the entrance examination not once, but 3 times, and 3 times he failed. It was a crushing start for a young man with no clear direction. Unsure what to do next, and at the suggestion of a friend's father, he enrolled almost by accident in a degree in forestry at the Indian Institute of Forest Management in Bhopal, a school that, as one writer put it, taught sustainability long before the word became fashionable. He had set out to defend his country with a rifle. Instead, he would come to understand it through its forests, its land, and the people who lived off both. After graduating, Rai joined the papermaker Balapur Industries and was posted into the deep, forested lands of Odisha, where the company sourced its raw material. Here, among tribal communities and remote villages, he saw 2 things at once: grinding poverty and remarkable resourcefulness. Ordinary people were inventing tools, techniques, and small businesses with almost no money and no support. He later spent time in a research role connected to the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, one of the country's finest institutions, bridging the world of elite ideas and the world of the rural poor. Slowly, a question took shape in his mind. What if these grassroots innovators simply needed capital, the one thing no one was willing to give them? In 1998, that question became a job. Rai was appointed the chief executive of GIAN, the Gujarat Grassroots Innovations Augmentation Network, a state-backed venture fund created to support innovators working with traditional knowledge, the tinkerers and inventors of rural India. It was an extraordinary training ground. Rai's task was to find grassroots innovators and help turn their ideas into something viable, backing exactly the kind of people that conventional banks and venture funds would never look at twice. He learned how hard, and how necessary, it was to channel capital to the bottom of the pyramid. John proved the need was real, but a government-linked body could only go so far. If this was going to work at scale, Rai realized it needed to become a genuine, independent investment fund. So he decided to build one. What made Rai's vision distinctive was that it was not charity. He did not want to give the poor handouts. He wanted to invest in them. As an entrepreneur invests in a startup, expecting the businesses to stand on their own and, eventually, to generate real returns. This was the heart of impact investing before the term was widely known. The belief that doing good and building sustainable, profitable enterprises were not opposites, but partners. It was a hard sell. Philanthropists thought it too commercial, and commercial investors thought it too risky and too small. Rai was proposing to stand precisely in the gap between them. Now he had to find someone willing to fund such an unproven idea. The first believers were not in India at all. Through connections he had made at IIM Ahmedabad and at GIAN, Rai got the chance to present his idea to a small group of Indian expatriates living in Singapore. They were not billionaires, just professionals who found his conviction compelling. In all, he managed to raise about 100,000 Singapore dollars, roughly 27 lakh rupees at the time. It was a modest sum, but it was a beginning. And it was there, in those early conversations, that the venture got its name, Aavishkaar, a Hindi word meaning innovation or discovery. The name captured everything Rai believed in, that innovation was not the preserve of the rich, and that discovering and funding it at the grassroots could change lives. In October 2001, Rai formally registered his fund in Gujarat, the Aavishkaar India Micro Venture Capital Fund. The vision was grand. The reality was precarious. His personal savings amounted to barely a few thousand rupees. When he moved his family to Mumbai, one of India's most expensive cities, he discovered that his children's school fees alone came to around 20,000 rupees, at a time when his life savings were closer to 5,000. He was, in effect, betting his family's security on an idea that the entire investment establishment had told him would not work. There was no salary cushion, no institutional backer, no safety net. There was only the conviction and a very long road ahead. What followed was a test of sheer endurance. It took Rai 4.5 years, from October 2001 all the way to March 2005, simply to raise his first real fund, about $1 million, or roughly 5 crore rupees. 4.5 years of pitching, of being turned away, of explaining again and again why backing a fish farmer or a rural dairy could be both good and sound. Most people would have given up long before. But each small check was proof that the idea was not crazy, only early. By the time that first fund closed, Aavishkaar had done something quietly historic. It had built one of the world's first vehicles to bring professional venture capital to the poor. The hard part of surviving was over. Now came the work of building at scale. From that fragile beginning, Rai built not just a fund but an entire ecosystem for inclusive finance. Over the years, and formalized through a reorganization in 2016, the Aavishkaar Group grew to span the whole spectrum of capital the underserved need. Aavishkaar Capital became the equity impact investor, backing entrepreneurs across the global south. Arohan grew into one of India's largest microfinance institutions, lending to low-income households. Ashv Finance became a non-bank lender serving small businesses, and Intellecap, the group's advisory arm, offered consulting, investment banking, and the influential Sankalp Forum, one of the world's largest gatherings on impact. Rai had understood something crucial. Solving poverty needed more than one kind of money. It needed equity, debt, advice, and community, all working together. The results showed up in the companies Aavishkaar backed, often as one of the very first investors. In financial inclusion, it supported institutions like Equitas, Suryodaya, Utkarsh, and Credit Access Grameen, several of which went on to become listed small finance banks and lenders reaching millions of previously unbanked Indians. In agriculture and rural supply chains, it backed businesses such as INI Farms, Agrostar, and the grain storage venture Ergos, helping farmers earn more for their produce. And it proved the model could pay. Aavishkaar had invested in the dairy company Milk Mantra back in 2013 and later sold its stake to Hatsun Agro for around $27.5 million. Impact and returns, exactly as Rai had promised, could go hand in hand. Having proven the model in India, Aavishkaar did something few Indian firms dared. It exported its expertise to the rest of the developing world. The firm expanded its investing across emerging Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, treating the global south not as scattered charity cases, but as one vast, connected market of aspiring entrepreneurs. That ambition attracted serious institutional partners, global investors, including Nuveen, part of the American giant TA, took stakes in the group to help fuel its expansion. The forester who had once struggled to raise 27 lakh rupees in Singapore was now running a platform that global capital wanted to be part of, channeling money from the world's largest institutions down to enterprises in villages across 2 continents. Today, the numbers tell the story that once sounded impossible. The Aavishkaar Group manages assets of roughly $1.5 billion across equity and credit, with Aavishkaar Capital alone overseeing several hundred million. It has made close to 90 investments across 8 funds and realized around 50 exits, proof that these were real investments, not donations. Most striking is the human scale. The group's work has reached an estimated 136 million people, the majority of them in India, and a large share of them women. Its flagship Bharat Fund alone helped create hundreds of thousands of jobs and livelihoods. From 5,000 rupees in a bank account, Vineet Rai had helped build a platform touching the lives of well over 100 million people. So what is Vineet Rai's legacy? He took an idea the entire financial world dismissed, that you could invest profitably and at scale in the poorest and most overlooked people, and he spent more than 2 decades proving it true. In doing so, he helped give birth to India's impact investing industry and inspired a generation of investors who now take for granted that capital can serve conscience. And he is not finished. Aavishkaar continues to raise new funds, moving into areas like deep technology while holding to its founding purpose. It is a remarkable arc for a man who failed to become a soldier and stumbled into forestry. In the end, the forester learned to find something more elusive than water beneath dry earth: opportunity, hidden in the lives of the poor. Thanks for listening.